What we find is difficult on the specialist exam. It's not like the fundamentals exam that's got lots of information about what the ranking of the different sections are, and there's all sorts of practice tests. When it comes to the specialist exam, that sort of information doesn't exist. So what we have been doing is we've been collecting all sorts of information from wherever we can find it to give you an idea of the structure of the specialist exam, and then give you some sample questions of those different areas, and just to give you some background. All right, so that's what the idea is to spend almost the 4 weeks going through the different exams, trying to give you as much help as possible on the exam techniques and exam structure for those different specialist exams. Like things, type of things where the BI specialist exam requires your understanding of data vault. Okay, so when I first saw it, it's like, oh shucks, I wasn't aware of the fact that I needed to understand all those different areas. Okay, so not to take up too much time, I sort of feel that I've got a lot more to do. So let's go through it. So we were dealing with the essential concepts, and if you remember, the first week we did our data quality manager. We went through essential concepts, practice the establishment, understand the framework. How would you review a framework? How would you go about defining one for your organization? Then we went on to data citizens, basically giving you basic profiling tools. So histograms, check diagrams, process flow analysis. So that was an understanding of how you could look at the data quality yourself. Then we went from there to our data professionals, which was building procedures to create data quality expectations, looking at tools and architectures. And now we're going to go to the data executive that is going to be responsible for justifying a data quality program. So it's about building a business case. And then we'll go on to just showing you an example of, I really like this example of the Canadian Institute for Health Information. Okay, the way in which they've customized these frameworks for themselves, even the dimensions and the way in which they have the definitions. So it's not to say that you have to follow all of these different frameworks religiously. You just need to have one, and you just need to make sure that it's appropriate for you and it's right for you. Great. So now we're going to go into the executives, and the most important thing is understanding what needs to go into your business case. What are the critical questions? And I was actually surprised these last 2 weeks when I've been reviewing a regulation on reference and master data. And one of the things the person said right in the beginning is, well, do you have a need for reference and master data? Just because everyone's doing it doesn't mean that you have to do it. Okay, so I like that question. And I think it's important that executives, CDOs, CDAOs have this understanding of, yes, we do have a data quality problem, and here are some examples, and here's some initial cost examples, cost calculations, rules of thumb to get that definition. Now, I'm using some of Tom Redman's quick techniques. I've got an Excel spreadsheet. If people are interested, I've put a lot of it automated into Excel, doing some costing so that I can take it into Power BI. So I'll show you some examples there. So there is what he calls the Friday afternoon measurement, and it's a 2-hour session. And if you're in Saudi, we call it a Thursday morning or Thursday afternoon for Paul. And then you would do a quick assessment with some business people. Okay, so then the next question you want to ask and answer is, where are we as an organization? And here are again some techniques. So for example, there's this force field analysis, which is very much a SWAT approach. but it quantifies. So a lot of the times your SWAT and Ishikawa don't have quantification or numerical quantification, and I think that's important. Then we want to look at common language assessment. Are we using the same language? Because when you start defining CDEs, when you start working, before you even start working on building your rules, you need to have a clear definition and understanding of what that word means or what the element means. And then what does your data quality data team look like? How do we improve our decision makers? How do we rate ourselves as decision makers when it comes to data quality? And then we go on to, because most of the challenges around data quality are about people and culture, I've now spoken about this ADCAR approach that I use, and also an awareness session or a desire by, you go almost by stakeholder, and you have to answer the question, what is in it for me? So if you're going to get these stakeholders to commit and invest in it, you need to be able to tell them what is in it for them. Okay. Then the training, which is the important part. And unfortunately, with data quality, it's for everybody. So, and I'm sure when you say, well, if it's for everyone, then it's very close to what most people call a data literacy program. But I battle with that data literacy, and it was good to see that um, Tom Redman also battles with it, because when we were young, I'm sure Drew can relate to it. When we had a illiterate, when we were called illiterate, then we were basically referred to being stupid or dumb, and we couldn't read or write. That was the insult. Okay, so I find that it can affect people, and they don't always respond well to it. So how do we change that? Okay, then tackling the culture. I believe changing data quality culture, especially for me, is that if I win one project at a time, if I get great success one project at a time, people start to see it and recognize that they need to be part of it. Okay. And then my last one is well, what's the return on investment? And I like this. It's a situation of, there's a really simple statement here, is to say, what we should be ensuring is that the reduction that we get from improvement, because a lot of the times data quality, the problems are cost related. Okay. You're not going to generate a lot of revenue with data quality, but you are going to reduce the costs. So are we getting enough cost reduction to offset the cost of the data quality program? Okay. Is that something, and how close can we get to that definition? So that to me is really important from a data quality point of view. And I'd just like to pause here and just to see if anyone has any comments, any questions around this business case, the questions that you need to answer, and what you need to help people understand within the organization, and especially your executives. Yeah, Martin, you're right. So it's get those small successes, get one project at a time. Yes, we want to change and we want to educate everyone and we want to get everything going, but it's one element at a time, and it's about and we always have these different ones. Where is our biggest problem, or where is our smallest success, or the one that we can get success and have the biggest impact? So that's an important set of decisions that you need to go through in terms of prioritizing the challenges you're facing. Okay. Okay, so now let's go one step further. Where is it hurting? What's the cost? So we have to learn how to do a mapping. We have to build a cost taxonomy. And then when we define the costs, and I had an experience on one of my customers, and what happened was we brought in a management consulting company that came along and did a whole lot of data quality reviews, and it was great. And then we said, well, that's fantastic. We can see some of the challenges, but what is the cost impact? And they, in some cases, I think they I wouldn't say exaggerated, but they over quantified that cost. And the business executive that was responsible for the department where this cost was being described, he said, "Look, yeah, I get what you're saying, but the cost that you're talking about is nowhere near what our costs are that we run the business at. So I don't see how you're getting that amount." And that had quite a negative view on the feedback in terms of what the state of the quality was, that initial data quality assessment. So be careful. Be careful of ramping those costs up to say, look at all these things that you've got and the challenges that you face, and this is what it's costing you as a business. Um, be careful of that. So one of the things I like about Tom Redmond's approach, he calls it Friday afternoon measurement. The idea is that you would spend the Friday afternoon choosing an important data asset, the critical BI report, or one that people are complaining about. I mean, that's something that I found fascinating when I walked onto another customer 2 years ago. As I walked on to their site within a day or so, when people heard that we were here to deal with data governance, they started coming to me to say, "Shucks, the quality of this data is terrible and very frustrating." I actually met someone, unfortunately for them, I met someone early on a Thursday morning, and they had spent up until 2 o'clock that morning trying to fix the data for a report, and they were not happy campers. And he was very cross. And it was now my warning there is to say you've got to be careful of following that emotion. You've got to get to some level of metric so you can explain to people that this is the size of the problem. You can't just say we got a horrible problem. Interestingly enough, when we interviewed the executives, there were 8 people, 8 executives. 7 of them said that they felt that data quality was a big problem, and one said, "Nah, the problem's not with the data; it's with the use of the data. It's with the way in which the business people use it." So, here's an approach. The approach, very simple. You'll choose a critical BI report. Okay, then you choose the last 100 records of that data set. Okay, and you sit down with the people that understand it. Now, please remember, this is your critical data element. So you're not going to look at every single attribute on that table or that report. You're just going to look at the important ones. So there's your first step, is to say, what is the set of important ones? Okay, and this was to do with the color of clothes that they were buying. Okay, now what they would go through is they would go through the 100 and say, are there any challenges with the critical data element? So is the record perfect, yes or no? And then you go through this across these are the errors for size, these are the errors for color, for amount. I'm quite amazed that they had no errors on name. That's typically the one that dies very quickly. So out of 100, they got a perfect score of 67. Okay, now that's fantastic. That's exactly what you want, but what does it mean? Okay, so you need to be able to explain to business what that means. And now there are 2 issues. One is, if I take 100 minus 67, then I get 33 records that are in error, and I can have this percentage of having 30, almost 30%, or well, this is, yeah, 30% of the time I've got wrong data and I can make wrong decisions. Okay, so you take one data set and maybe you do it for 3 or 4 months, where you go through every Friday and you do it and you go one data set at a time. But the important message is, this is the important aspect that you got to do. So we've got to be able to quantify it. Now, what Tom suggests is you use this concept called apply the rule of 10. Basically saying it costs 10 times as much to complete a unit of work when the input data is defective as it does when it is perfect. Okay, so if you had perfect data with a unit cost of processing it of $1, then 100 units for that day of work would cost you 100 USD. Now, for 67%, look at what happens When you take the 33 records and you multiply by 10, you get $397 to perform those 100 units. And that's the type of metric that you're wanting to give to the business owners to, well, first of all, to answer that question, what is in it for me? Okay, well, instead of operating at 397, we would suggest that maybe you should be able to achieve a target of 160 or 200. Please don't get tempted to say we're going to go to perfect, because you're going to take a lot to get to perfect. So you want to set the next target. Okay, so we're at 397 now. If we do all this fixing, then we can get to 300, and then we get to 250, to 200, and maybe one day we get to an appropriate 120, whatever that area is. Now, what's important here is that this is just a quick review of the data. This is not a formal data quality initial assessment to have a robust scope definition of your quality problem. It's there to help you quantify the size of the quality problem that you can talk to business about. Okay. Any comments? Anybody, anyone, how do they feel about this approach? Any questions? Yes, Marcel.
Howard, so I understand that you take the critical data element. So if you do data discovery and you identify certain databases or data tables, so then out of that, you first have to determine and tag your critical data elements, and then you apply this model. Do you understand it correctly?
Yeah. Yes, correct.
Okay.
Now, Marcel, what I like to do is start off with a report, because that's the place that people see the pain and recognize the challenges. So they would very easily say, this report is giving me this issue. Once you've got the report identified, then you would do a data lineage back to the original database table or application that caused the problem. So be careful of, and I find that a lot, is when you start off with an application database, I could have 1,000 tables. Where do I start? Okay, so it's a bit hard starting at the application side. It's a lot easier to start at the BI report that people are complaining about, or a data extract that they use to answer to make a decision.
Thanks, Howard.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so let's go. So that's a helpful one. How do we get just an initial figure to go into the business case? Because you're wanting to get support to make a change, to create the program, to build the initiative, and you need some level of quantification. Okay, and I know we spent on that one project that I was referring to, it was about a 6-month journey, and then they only got the results after 6 months. Now, lots of murmuring and issues and concerns start to develop, so be careful of that scenario. Okay. All right, then what happens is we need to look at the change, our organization. Are we able to change? What is the change going to look like? And so we can say, fantastic, we want to do this new way of doing things. We want to bring on a new technology. We want to do advanced analytics or data science. Now, what are the challenges? What people refer to as this force field is what are the restraining forces? And if I convert that to a SWOT analysis, it's going to be the weaknesses and the threats. Okay. And we all know, right? I think we all know that the W on SWOT stands for weaknesses, and those are internal. What are the challenges that the organization is facing? And similarly, the S in SWOT stands for organizational strength. So where are our people strong? Where do we have good processes? Where are our strengths? Now, remember, this can come from your maturity assessment. So once you've done a data management maturity assessment, you should be able to answer these two. Okay. Then you can start looking at opportunities, success stories in the market, and then threats, industry failures, or regulations, or elements like that, or someone growing a lot faster than your competitors, that competitive advantage, some competitors growing a lot faster than you are. Where is that threat? And then you can also bring this up into data and technology. But what's helpful here is that when you define these forces, you're categorizing the forces. Okay. So let's go and show you a little bit of how this works out. And here's an example of the impact for data science. Okay, so here we have restraining forces. Okay, and I'm sure we're all comfortable. We've all heard these before: skepticism and fear fueled by high-profile failures. Okay, the really challenging ones where everyone's saying, "Oh, look at what they did here. Look at Cambridge Analytics, Facebook. Look what everybody happened. Everyone is dying. So how do we prevent?" And so maybe we shouldn't do it. Okay. The other challenge that we have is that people recognize that when there's the hype, when the vendors are going crazy, like on things like ChatGPT, yeah, it's fine, but it's not as easy as what people are making them out to be. Okay. From an organization point of view, what are the problems we're having with our small data? Yes, we want to go to big data, but what are the problems with the small data? What are the challenges we have? What do we care? What is the culture around data science? Is it something that people don't want to bring in? They're too scared of how it may affect their jobs and different things like that. So there's lots of these things that you need to go through. And for each force, you define a level of 1 to 5. Okay. You define the restraining and you define the driving forces. Now, these driving forces are really good for your strategy or awareness. So you can say, look at the benefit, the FANGs, that's Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and Spotify. Okay, look how well they're doing. Look at the amazing success they have. So those are the success stories, and you want those use cases to explain to people. So you need to have a series of success stories to create that interest. Okay. Number of good data scientists are growing. We're seeing that a lot more. And then we're also seeing cloud computing where things are cheaper. So these are the benefits. And then data quality methods. Okay, so can we fix it? Now, once you've got this force field, and I haven't gone to the quantification, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, once you've got this, then you can, these are your goals. You can strengthen and increase the driving forces. And I'm wondering if those people remember the Ishikawa diagram. The ones below the line push it up. So we're getting benefit as we strengthen, right? And then the ones below the line are creating bigger issues. So we want to strengthen and increase our driving forces, and we want to weaken or decrease the restraining forces. And then what we're trying to do is transform some of the restraining to driving. Okay. So there we have missed opportunities. We would want to turn that around and saying, well, we're getting all the opportunities we have on our little data. Okay, so that's the way we'd want to turn it around, and that's what you're wanting to do. But you need a diagram like this. And I really like to show this. This is a nice one that Danette McGilray, Tom Redman, and James Price did in 2016, where they did an Ishikawa diagram on why are we battling to manage our assets? What are the root cause analysis? Okay. Now I like this, and I keep saying to people that can't you see how amazing this is in terms of on one page, you can see all the challenges, very helpful way of communicating. And this one over here, which is important, is, well, what impact, what is it having? It's reducing customer experience. It's reducing organizational alacrity. Alacrity means agility. Competitive advantage, we're losing productivity, we're losing increased cost, increased risk. That's the summary. Those are the punchy one pages, the summary of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to resolve. And of course, you're then going to help choose your small successes by dealing with certain issues. So I'm not going to go through all of this. This is just part of the deck. I will be releasing the deck at the end of this week, so you'll get the deck and all of this information will be available. Now, what I wanted to do is just show you an example of this. So let's take ChatGPT. So what are the strengths of ChatGPT? That natural language processing is phenomenal. Okay, I'm sure you may have seen last week or week before we did about the videos that we're processing and doing that, and we're making use of technology or NLP to extract the information from the videos and then to summarize it. So it's amazing how quickly you can get quite a detailed report of what's in the video, because sometimes it's easier to go chapter by chapter than it is to go through the whole video. So we can now add chapters, and this natural language processing is doing it for us. Customizable. So yes, we can apply it to our different organizations. We can customize that. And then we have large and diverse training data. So the bigger your corpus is, the more information you have, the more ChatGPT is able to search your documents and understand what you have. Okay, now we just had a scenario. If I did some calculations on the videos that Dame South Africa has, we have in the region of 211 videos. We averaging between 1 hour 15 and 1 hour 25, the average time on the videos. So we've got in the region of, well, I mean, it's 200 hours, close on 300 hours of videos that we're picking up. Okay, then we've also got we know that ChatGPT is efficient and scalable. Okay, so I don't know how many of you are working with tools like Grammarly and things like that, where you can just select a piece of text and say, tell me how to improve it, what am I missing, and things like that. And it's not like you have to wait a whole lot of time for these things to come back. Okay, so this ability to converse with AI is phenomenal, that opportunity that we're getting. The number of applications is growing every day. We see it happening all the time. And then just the rate in which NLP is growing is phenomenal. Google just released their Bart. I love working with Bart. I love working with Bing. When I'm asking for doing research, I constantly ask both of them, what do you have on this? Please explain that. And it's nice to see the differences. And you can use all these tools, and they're quick to summarize pages and whatever it is. Now, we must understand the weaknesses. So contextual awareness. Fascinating, when you do video analysis, it just focuses on the audio and doesn't focus on the screen. Or so when we're doing our video analysis, that analysis or the NLP is not seeing anything that's visible on the screen. It's only what I've spoken about and what I mentioned. So if I just said, can you see this is a problem? It won't know what I'm talking about. It won't have the context. And we have to be careful of that situation. Potential for biases, dependence on OpenAI, that's an organization. And now, is this the right way to go? Who do we choose? Do we choose Bing or do we choose Bart? And of course, if you're sitting on Azure, then you probably find that the Microsoft one is more appropriate and you can use it a lot easier. Okay, what are the different threats that we have? And then, of course, regulation and ethical concerns. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the situation where they are taking OpenAI to court about all of the web scraping. All right, so they're really raising ethical issues. And then, of course, there's certain technical limitations that we are facing. Okay. All right, so the accuracy is not all there. I mean, I sometimes I actually sent Remco a screenshot of what ChatGPT on one of his calls. They said, this is a comparison between Remco and AI. That's what the ChatGPT or the mind grasp thought we were talking about. So there are limits and challenges that we have to face. But does it mean we don't do it? That's the important question. So here's an example of what I use in Excel and Power BI. So I've got a numeric naming, a numeric convention here where I've got my opportunities. These are my categories. Okay. Yeah, hallucination, as they call it, when it lies. Yes, it sort of makes it up. So when when it can't find the exact thing, then it tends to make certain things up. So you have to keep on reviewing it, and that's almost sometimes where the ethical issue comes about. And there was a lovely case study, Connie, about 4 or 5 lawyers that built a case, and then ChatGPT actually said this is from case law, and it quoted certain cases, and the lawyers didn't check it. When it went to the court, the judge says these cases don't exist. Okay, so that was a bit of a disaster for the lawyers. Okay, but anyway, this is what we want to do. We want to get what's called the FFA score. Okay, so here we have opportunities and strengths, and then external, we want threats and weaknesses. Now, the technique that I use in my Excel, and I'm just going to try to get that Excel for you just to show you the calculations. Sorry. Yeah, let me just go to it. Okay, so here's my Excel, my toolkit in the different scenario. Now, what I do is, I'm hoping you can see that. What I do is I use the scoring mechanism where I basically allocate strength is +2, weakness is -2, opportunity is 1 and -1. And the reason I use those, I use it for data strategy as well. The reason I use the scoring mechanism is I can do a lot more with my internal strengths and weaknesses than I can with external threats and opportunities. So I favor internal, but I do this so that you can change whatever you would like to do. And then you can see this is the scoring mechanism. It's 1 to 5. This is what you rate it on. 0 is undefined, 1 is a minor impact, and 5 is major. And so I can rate things 1 to 5. I then summarize all the opportunities, and then I multiply it by that multiplication factor, giving me a score of 45 and minus 45 in this situation, and then I get 0. So in this situation, there's no benefit or negative around it. So do we really have a challenge? Not sure. Okay, so here's one that I applied for ChatGPT, and this was for Modelware systems. Do we benefit using ChatGPT on our videos? And I did this calculation, and the score for my organization and for my criteria was 7. I got a positive of 7, so 41 positive and minus 34. Now, what I'd like to do is I would then say, well, what are the ethical concerns around ChatGPT? Okay, so for me, because it's really just interpreting the videos, I don't have a lot of ethical issues. What I do have is I got to be careful of it uses people's names and things like that. And so what we do is we, instead of saying Howard Diesel, we'd say Howard or Remco or Drew. We wouldn't say Drew Kennedy or Martin Go. We would just use those names. So we have to have an editor that goes through it and ensures that we're not exposing information that shouldn't be there. But because the videos are made public, then it's not that much of an issue. Contextual awareness, that's big for us. Okay. Potential for bias, not really in what we're trying to do, and then dependency on OpenAI. And what we have seen is we started to evaluate some other vendors, and they are not using OpenAI, so it's not a big issue for us. Okay. So there's just an example. What we're looking at is that 7 that is going to be used to build the business case. Any questions, any comments? Is this helpful? So please, the SWOT analysis is just strength, weakness, opportunity, threats, which is great, but it doesn't have a quantification mechanism. And you want to get the quantification, you want to create some numbers so you can analyze it and you can see the impact on the next time you measure, you can see the impact. I'm going to just be a little bit quiet for a while. Any comments? Okay. All righty. Okay. I thought Paul would be asking me a few questions today, but I think he's probably doing something else. Not so, Paul.
No,
All right.
I'm right here.
Okay. Any comments? What's your thinking about this, using this approach from a business case point of view?
No, just thinking about the scoring of the SWAT. And I was just, my head was going towards the strategy work that we have done with you.
Yes.
And
yes.
and how to more of how to prioritize those SWATs.
Right.
And this is just a great mechanism that you've created here to do that.
Excellent.
Because yes, we've used the risk analysis as well, but this is just another good dimension to bring possibly another angle or some balance.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And what we also remember is that these strengths and weaknesses, if you're trying to bring in a new capability like data science, your data maturity assessment can help you bring in a lot of that information. Remember, Paul, we get almost the challenges that the SWATs that come from our DMMA feed into the data strategy. Okay.
Yes.
So you're wanting to do that as well. Okay. Now the next thing that is important from a data quality point of view has to be what we refer to as a common language. Okay. We need to make sure that we have a good definition of this critical data element. I promise you the results and the outcome of data quality assessments, depending on the definition, if it's a bad definition, those rules become very flaky and difficult. So here is just the process and the set of people that will be part of defining and getting your common language or your business glossary. And what I like to do is I like to focus on this, which is called writing a business definition. Here is some techniques that we use to define the definition. And there, for an example, is a definition that I'm building in terms of what is a participant who engages with learning resources. So you can see I've had to go through this classification. Why do they want to participate? Who is participating? What are they participating with? When, where, how, and how many? Okay, so we're saying a learner or a participant, they're looking for knowledge upliftment. Okay, so these are helpful things. Because you now get relationships between your different terms, and you can start also building a data model and checking your data model with this at the same time. Okay, there's a nice article by David Hay, which is called Developing and Adopting a Common Language. I think Zachman was involved in it as well on TDAN. So if you'd like to go through this, there's a really nice description on doing it. But please get your language right. Please get your language right. And it's not just business language, it's also data management language. Okay. Yeah, Martin, there's that one by Ronald Ross, and then also Mark Atkins and Terry Smith, who brought out that data governance needs risk management. There was a lot on establishing teams or groups of language people that would look after your language. So quite a few people are doing that scenario as well. Okay, now what we're wanting to do as well is look at our people and have an analysis of who are those regular people, okay? Who are those people from the data generation that are becoming really comfortable with working with data? Who are those people that are there that are embedded? They are really part of the organization and they're managing some of the data. And then we've got what's referred to as our data provocateurs, which means they will challenge the status quo. They will challenge people to get better and to define things that in a more appropriate way. And what we're wanting to do is help our regular people become part of the data generation. So it's people like myself and Drew that we're the regular people and we need to become part of the data generation. Okay. All right. Then we're also talking about the team that we're bringing in. How does DQ affect the team? And we know that we've got entrepreneurs that look after monetizing the data, the developers, the data defenders, which are basically your data governance, your data stewards, your architect, your governor, your ethicist, and then your data quality leaders. and your data trainers, and your data transformers. So these are the people that you want in your data teams, and you want to be able to identify who they are and make sure you've got those roles defined. Now, the next thing that's also helpful in your business case is to get an understanding of, well, how data driven are we? I always love challenging people to say, well, do we really understand what data driven means and how long it's going to take our organization to get to data driven? So do you have a way of rating where you are at this point in time? Okay, are you? I build that continuum. I don't know if you remember it. Are you data resistant as an organization? Are you data enabled? Are you data led? Are you data driven? Are you knowledge driven? That's almost a growth path that you need to get, and you want to position yourself in those areas because depending on where you are, you may need to, as an example, bring on more change management people to get over the resistance. That stakeholder, what's in it for me, what's the vision, that you want to focus on overcoming the resistance. Now, what this spreadsheet is doing and helping us decide on is, well, how good are we at making data decisions? So this is almost a challenge that you're going to bring to the organization, is to say, well, how many times do you use diverse data and diverse viewpoints in the situation? How many times do you look at understanding the data? How many do you understand the level of importance on high quality data, experimenting on supplementing existing data? So one of the ways we have of if we don't have the right level of quality on certain data, can we go somewhere else to get better data rather than trying to fix it? Okay. So how do we bring in supplementary data to give us better answers and more information? Now, it's quite helpful when we go through this thing to say, well, what would we honestly score? And this is the scoring technique that's suggested. So you get a 1 for every habit that you consistently demonstrate. Okay, maybe once or twice you don't do it, but 99% of the time you're consistently demonstrating that. Then 0.5 is you follow it most of the time, but not all. So in some cases you didn't really delegate it, you don't understand the variation that's possible. And then the last one is to say, yeah, if you can only bring in 1 or 2 cases, then you get a 0, and you want to then bring in a total score. So helpful to do this with your execs, to get your board and your data execs that come onto that steering committee, keep on reviewing them, right? And see and challenging them to say, well, are we making data-driven decisions appropriately? Okay. Any comments, any questions? People are very quiet today. I'm not sure if I'm losing people. Okay, Andrew, thank you. Excellent. All right, now we go on to data quality training, and we need to train everybody. Okay, when it comes to this data quality side, we need to achieve this everybody thing. Now, I really like this quote because I know Paul is constantly saying, we need a data literacy course and stuff like that. And I said, okay, I agree with you. We do need one, but what's the right term? And so Tom Redman calls it data savvy. Other people call it data abilities. And this is the sort of structure that I'd like to do now. The important part is that it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to cost a lot, because please remember, these data abilities is not just about writing a forecast or doing a statistical analysis and then presenting a graph and reading the graph. That's a very small section of the data literacy. Okay, and I'm going to give you some areas that need to be covered. But I feel that we have to go all the way from reading, writing, arguing, and managing data. Okay, so managing data is part of the data literacy. Okay, and Marcel, I'm actually going to show you here in terms of the different people at the different levels. Okay, and then I also like this one in terms of saying, well, be careful of making too much issue around cost of a lot of money, because this is the situation of, have we understood the cost of ignorance, that people don't understand what's going on? What is that costing us? Exactly how to quantify it. What I like to do is, when I do my root cause analysis, and you've got, I don't know if you remember that root cause analysis, I got a lot of those ideas from Tom Redman when he did this root cause, where they had this situation on lack of awareness, no understanding on what to do, don't know how to put the information to work. These are the things that when you have that area over there, you want to put some level of cost to those challenges that you're facing. It's not, you just want to be able to then say, okay, these areas are due to ignorance, and that's what the cost is. So you'd want to bring out that cost as well. Okay. Martin, did that answer your question? Yes, you got your hand up. Okay, great. All right, so now this is part of this sort of the ability that we feel that people need to be able to work with. Okay, so can you see there that the first level is almost what I like to call our what we call our data citizens, that they actually can use data according to the policies, so they can follow the policies. So if we talk about a data quality policy in terms of using data, forecasting, sharing data, can the people follow the policies that you've created? The next one is, can they contribute to the improvement of data quality? So can they see that there's a problem? Can they describe a data quality rule or expectation that will help us improve? And then can they do a root cause analysis to say, it's coming from this business process, this field, these people are capturing it incorrectly. Can they contribute? Can they help us understand how to improve the quality that we're facing? Then we go on to applying data on the job. So now, how do we get the BI report or the statistical analysis or the forecasting? How do we apply it? Then it's about being able to lead the data quality work at a team level when we do the assessments. Then we want to do more advanced data science to go deeper. And then when you go to data models or analytical models, you now got a different level of quality dimensions, and we refer to that almost as the error rate. How do we then bring in quality checks at that level as well? And not exactly the same dimensions, and you'll use different levels of dimensions. And I'm hopefully, when I get to that example of CIHI, you'll see how they've changed some of those dimension definitions. Okay, then are we better decision makers? Okay, and then of course, then we go into more utilization of advanced data science. Okay, so there is part of the training that we needed to do. Okay, any questions on building that business use case, or the business case? Let's just go through that again. We want to be able to understand what the size of our data quality problem is, what's the root cause, what's the level of ignorance, the cost, the force field analysis, language, the data quality team. What's the state of our decision making, business decision making? Okay, based on data, the change. Okay, awareness, desire, training, culture, and then this final summary of cost reduction. Any questions or comments on that before we go to the example? Okay.
Sorry, I was fighting with a mic. Just a question. Might be a silly one. So that's decision making is almost decision maturity, right? So
yes.
Do you literally conduct it the same way we've been? You sit with the execs and you interview them and get a score, and we start to set a roadmap of how we're going to, and that will then translate into a set of weaknesses that will be aligned in your strategy, right?
So your weaknesses are also going to be on not just, so decision making is one aspect to those weaknesses, Paul,
Yes.
but
Yes.
it's certainly something that you'll bring in. It's not all of them. You still want to be going through your data quality areas
Sure.
to be able to review what other challenges and issues you're facing within the organization.
Yeah. You obviously pick up some correlation to the weaknesses in the data
Yes.
quality linked to some of the decision issues or the
Yes.
lack of decision. Yeah.
Correct. Correct.
Awesome.
Okay. Fantastic. All right. So as an exec, you want to be able to put together a business case that addresses these questions. Okay. And then you're going to do that ongoing monitoring. All right. Okay. So now I wanted to just show you this scenario of this Canadian Institute for Health Information. Now, what I really like about this business case is that this is an organization that really provides what they call, it's not completely open data, but most of it's open data. They do charge for some of it. So when I was doing what, I don't know if any of you have seen that the EDM Council released the first or the paper on data code. Anybody see that? This week, the Sunil Soers released something on data code. I was on that body, and what we had to do was we had something like 60 or 70 companies that are data based, and they sell data, they provide data, and they've created these companies. Okay. All right, so this was one of the companies that I looked at, and it was really exciting. I had to go through and answer questions. So, from an executive point of view, do the people have the background and the education on data? Okay, and so you almost looked at their pedigree to be able to say, well, they're running a data co-organization. What is their pedigree? Is it business administration or where are we? Now, these people, they collect all the health information from the Canadian government, the Canadian hospitals, and they package it as time series and advanced analytics. And then they actually, in some cases, sell it. And in some cases, they publish it and they would be able to say, can you see in this area on Canada where we have our First Nations, we are battling with alcoholism or whatever it is, and this is what we can do to fix it, and this is the size of the medical problem, the health issue. Okay, and they're doing it all over. They're doing it from drugs to pregnancy to all these different things. They're collecting information, data. Now, what I liked about them, the very first thing that struck me, and the reason they're using the term information is that they say they don't produce any data, they collect data and they produce information. So they actually do the analytics on the data. So they don't want to talk about data quality, they want to talk about information quality. What they'll then do is to say, if they receive data from a ministry or a hospital, they have their data quality expectations and they'll send it back if it doesn't reach those expectations. So they're operating at a different level, but I really like that how they distinguish the role that they play. Okay, and then these are their data quality dimensions. Okay, so fit for purpose, fit for use, we all know that. Relevance, is the information meeting the user's requirements and potential needs? So it's all about, is the data that we've got helping people understand the challenges they're facing with the health industry and to make the appropriate adjustments. Okay, what's the timeliness of it? I'm sure you've seen there's so many times when these big organizations publish data, and most of the times it's at 2019, but we're sitting at 2023, and it's like, wow, we like 4 years down the road, that timeliness seems out of line. It's just taking too long to get to us. Comparability, should they trust on the data they received? Yes, I think that's a very hard. They do a lot to actually validate that they're getting trustworthy data, because they then go and generate graphs. And I know that Connie is around, and she does a lot of that work and bringing it in, and they assess the data that they're getting. So it's not an easy situation, and they have to build certain checks and balances on the data that they're getting. Very similar to central banks, where they're getting everything from the reporting entities, and they basically a data warehousing scenario, and then they make decisions based on the data that's coming from the reporting entities. Okay, clarity and accuracy, that's where their focus is. So this is critical if they are going to produce information that people can trust and make policy decisions in terms of health. They've got to understand exactly where they fit in this situation. Okay, so these are the principles that they developed. It's a multi-dimensional concept. So you've got things that different needs outweigh each other, and they need to balance it to get an overall benefit for the consumer. Okay, which we understand. It's relative and based on need. They're not looking for perfection. Okay, so this is our problem. If they look for perfection, then they probably wouldn't get any data, and they wouldn't be able to present some of the graphs. Consumers informed so that they may assess its fitness. So every single piece of data or interpretation that they build, they will have a quality review on it. And then again, it's about shared responsibility. Everybody in the organization, ownership, stewardship, those are the principles that they work by. Okay. Okay, so assurance occurs at every stage of the information lifecycle. So they've built the information delivery lifecycle, and then they check it all the time. It's not at the end when I have a time series. Now, do I trust the time series? It's all the way through in terms of, and I remember doing this with an economics department. They run through a whole lot of filtering of the data, removing the outliers. Then they go into, and they finally get a graph and a representation or a time series. It's gone too far. You've got to be able to ask the question, well, with this transformation that I did on just getting the data into the right shape, what is the change in quality been from when I got it, and how much have we deviated? So it's not about the last step. And Duran and Deming also had these things of get your quality each step of the way, not do a big data quality at the end of this analysis. And data science can fit into this problem where they get the data sets, they do a whole lot of stuff, and then they give you the final result. And it's a case of, but what happened in between here? Okay. So these are the different areas that they focus on. Now, they've built a framework, so it's not the same as a methodology. They've built like a skeleton, and people can fit it in. And can you see this is their cycle? So the data is created by other organizations. They capture and submit it. It then gets processed by CIHI and then analyzed and disseminated. So they're really responsible for these last three steps. Okay, but they have to prevent themselves from getting data that's not appropriate. And they publish the guidelines to the organizations that send them data. So they do a lot of that training on the people that send the data to them to make sure that it's right, and then knowledge exchange. They would say, your data is battling here, here, and here. What can we do to improve that? Okay. And these are the different activities, and it starts at the bottom. Evaluate and document. So document the metadata, document the data, do quality assessments. Then what can we do to improve it? Okay. Then we go to what can we do to prevent it? They have to go back to the people that are providing them the data and say, what can we do to fix this data? What can we automate? And then we've got this monitor and control. That's the cycle that they work through. Okay. And this is what they're trying to achieve. Increase knowledge, better understanding of the time series and the data, increase trust, more usage, so they measure what data sets are being used, very much like an open data platform. And then, of course, increased quality. Those are the core outcomes that they've set. Okay, now these are their dimensions. Okay, now what I found interesting initially, I said, but that's the same as what we've got, but it's not. That's not the case. Oh, sorry. Let me just show you some of the examples here. I want to just get into a magnifying glass, and we can see over here in terms of empirical contradictions, uncertainty, time, date, numerical values, inadmissible precision, inadmissible standardized vocabulary. So remember what we had in data quality, we had our dimension and then the concepts. These represent all of the concepts that they are measuring against, and they've got another layer that they've introduced. Can you see here, this is because of the advanced analytics, univariate outlier, multivariate, that's multiple variables. What are the different outliers with relationship to each other, the location, the shape, the scale. So can you see that their dimensions are very peculiar to themselves. So please don't think that the dimensions you get from the DMBOK or whatever it is, those are the only dimensions. You must build the dimensions for yourself that make sense to your business. Okay. But if you can use the ones that you've got, fantastic. That's all right. Now these are the R functions that they use, and they link them to the data quality concept. So they have built a whole lot of terms, missingness, and these different areas that they use to evaluate. And these are the type of reports that they produce. Here you can see the waist circumference, body height, and they build heat maps of the sort of missingness, segment missingness. Can you see the different issues that they're facing over here? So they've got quite a in-depth way of reporting all of these challenges that they are facing. But nice to see the effort that they put in to define it for themselves. Okay, it's not that standardized metric. Okay, and that's really what I wanted to show you in terms of how an organization has applied it to their business and what gives their business value. And that's the end of the series, the end of the data quality. I hope you got lots of value and benefit. But any questions? Love to see your comments and questions. Thank you. Okay, so what I will do now is, over and above the recordings, I will also make this deck available. There's lots and lots of information here. There's Excel spreadsheets and things like that you can use to help build. I'm happy to provide that for you, and we'll publish sometime next week. We'll publish all the documentation. Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. There's a hand up, Busayo.
Yes, good afternoon. I have a question.
Sure.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can. Yes.
So I was wondering, so if the data sources for this Canadian institute, if it's so massive, let's say they are getting data from up to 50 different organizations, do they have to do some sort of data quality assessment for each of these organizations? Won't it be so overwhelming for them? Or what's the best approach where the data sources are many?
Okay. I mean, you are right, because they are picking up data from, they pick up all the health, the different, even in what they call the First Nation areas, they will do collection of data coming from those people. Now, they were part of the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Health is the one that's making sure that everyone reports the data. And so they've laid down the rules that if you're part of this, if you have anything to do with health, this is the data that you need to collect, and they send the data in. So they have to collect the data, and they do check and they do assess the quality of the data, and they will work with the people to improve the quality. Now, when you ask, and I think the question that one really gets to is to say, well, what happens if an organization sends me data and it doesn't meet the standard? Well, unfortunately, what you'd have to do with that, there's a set of dimensions. You'd have to exclude the data, but then you'd ask yourself, well, what is the impact on that on the universe of data that I get? So if one municipality is reporting badly, but 20 are not, then I can still draw certain conclusions. But you'd have to have the appropriate impact assessment on whether that source of data was, what sort of impact it has. Now, we did that with, in the banking area, they have that in Radar and BCBS, where they have those globally, they call it GSBs, the globally significant banks, and then you would rate the different organizations, and then of course you'd apply different expectations depending on the level and the importance by organization. Does that answer your question?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Now, what we are seeing in big government industries, like even in Saudi, where we're doing a lot of work, is that they are building what they call a data catalog. They are creating owners, they're creating data quality definitions, and of course they're trying to get as much data as possible, and then they're trying to improve the training on all of their people. And so they would have these individual assessments, and they are with their data catalog, they're saying, who is the owner or the authoritative source for Ministry of Commerce or commercial data, legal entities? Who's the owner of citizen data? And they're going through that whole process of defining who's responsible for the source, the authoritative source of the information. So that's a big government focus and task that needs to be done. And the Ministry of Health within Canada would have to do a similar situation. And they created CIHI as the data code that's related to the Ministry of Health. So part of that was this whole data code is very exciting. If, for example, ministries, they should not be making or trying to make a whole lot of money out of the data that they are collecting. And so what happens is that in some cases, they create an individual company that's not restricted by some of those confidentiality issues and conflict of interest. And these people are all about building data, providing data, reliable data, and making money out of data. Okay, so we have a question. How can we enforce data quality using data catalogs on the operational data? Okay, so there's quite a few aspects to that. When you have a data catalog, the nice part on the data catalog is that it can basically and should have for every data asset, or what we like to call, remember Paul Bolton worked with me on one, we called it, we had a data catalog, but we divided it into two. So we had our freshwater data catalog, and then we had our salty water data catalog. The freshwater data catalog contained data assets that we, from a data governance point of view, had created, had the metadata defined, had all of the what we call the state of that data. We reconstructed it, and then we were automating the data quality assessments on a daily basis of that operational data, and we would publish a data quality score according to the business rules for that data. Okay, so we would go through that process of doing the daily assessment, and then in a way setting targets for the new quality that we wanted to receive. But the nice thing about the data catalog, what it supports us in, separate the data that's not under management from the data that is under governance and curation. Then that means that if they're under curation, they should have all of the business rules, the data quality rules, and then daily assessment of the data quality so you could pick it up. Does that answer your question? Maya? Excellent. Yes, the data catalog is very helpful because remember the new data catalog, the Gen 3 data catalog, it's almost your metadata repository. That's the thing that's collecting everything, your data lineage, your data models, your business glossary. It's bringing all of the stuff together in your data catalog. So it's your metadata repository, and it's the one that's going to visualize and disseminate information about the data assets. Now, I like to separate them in my clean water data assets and my salty water. If you keep drinking out of the salty water, you're going to go mad. We don't remove it because some of the data scientists still want to see it, but we can't vouch for that data, and we haven't got around to curating the data. But good question. That it's a very important level of integration, and you'll find sometimes that the thing jumps around. Okay, Dumi, fantastic. Any further question before we close? But thank you all. Thanks. Been a really interesting session this month. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Howard. Brilliant, eh? Sure.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Martin. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
Bye.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.